And welcome back to the Process podcast.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask, why did you choose that side of the seat today? Any particular reason? Oh, I know.
Now I'm thinking about it. I know what you're going to say. No, it's actually because we were supposed to have someone else on the podcast, and I was definitely not going to fit in there.
That's true.
And then I thought we better make more space on that side. So, because James is enormous. So I was going to pull the table out from there, and I was just over here already. But now I'm thinking about it. My left side is definitely better than my right side right now.
Well, you know, my left side is also better than my right side. So this is a stitch up.
Your right one looks a bit more
Right one's
vascular.
more vascular.
Yeah.
Because it's a little skinnier from the big operation I had. But I think there's more density on this side.
I think you just
okay.
You want to show your wedding ring, that's all.
Also true. Okay. And we're here to talk about a couple of things. Number one.
Yeah.
I would love to start with a bit of an update on your elbow. When you were last on the podcast, you were pre-operation. I think you were a couple of weeks out.
I don't think did I have my...
You hadn't had the op yet.
No, did I have my scans yet?
You'd maybe not even had your scans. Yeah. So I think we're about 4 or 5 weeks away from that last episode. So I'd love to start with that. But then the biggest conversation today is going to be around drugs in CrossFit.
Yeah.
Because lots of news breaking the internet at the moment about athletes testing positive from, in different divisions, different regions, and the testing definitely hasn't all finished yet. And I'd love to just get your take on that and kind of where you sit on all of it.
Yeah.
So to start, elbow. What did you end up having done? So what was the damage? I think I think we didn't have the MRI results. So what actually ended up happening?
All right. So for those who know the events, it was event 5, which was a snatch ladder. At the second last bar, my second rep, which was 245, I snatched it. I was at the bottom of the rep, and as I started to stand up, the bar started going slightly in front of me. So I then, as I was standing up, stepped forward, which then obviously I stepped too far. Elbow went slightly in front of the bar. Bar then started going backwards, and obviously the horizontal forces were just a bit too much for my elbow to handle. So I had a distal tear, which means it was torn around the forearm, if that makes sense to more people, versus the humerus, the upper arm. So it tore at the forearm, which is a distal site of the UCL. And then that's a ligament. And then I also fully ruptured my common flexor tendon at the proximal site at the elbow. So there's only one attachment site there, but so full rupture of both. Needed to obviously wait for inflammation to come down. Eventually went in. I think something to understand is that you don't actually have to have a reconstruction surgery or any surgery if you just wanted to live life. I could have quite happily just not have had any surgery done, and my body would have healed itself. There would have been like a bit of a hole on my arm where the tendon probably didn't repair properly naturally, and the ligament would never fully repair by itself anyway. It's because it's fully ruptured. But I could still live life. I just wouldn't be able to do things like kind of like an ACL on the knee, which I guess people can understand a bit more because it's a more common thing, it seems, is I wouldn't be able to do any aggressive like throwing where the elbow is in front of the wrist and I'm throwing aggressively. I wouldn't be able to stabilize anything that moves laterally, but most people don't do that in their everyday life. It's more like when you think about your hand going out away from your body being pulled away, that movement would be bad for me. So doctors went in, they reconnected both the ligament and the tendon, which was a success, I believe. They also put in they call it an internal brace, which if you just imagine like kind of a piece of plastic, which is small, but a bit of plastic, and it's folded over twice, and then they basically bolt that in, one at the distal site, one at the proximal site, just to give a bit of support. After that, I spent a night in hospital, and I had 4 weeks in a cast where my wrist and my elbow was completely fixed. So my wrist was stuck at neutral and my elbow was locked at 90 degrees. I had range in my shoulder. Obviously I could do everything in my shoulder, but otherwise I was locked at 90 degrees. I had a 2-week checkup where they removed stitches, cut off the cast. I thought I was going to be free, but they said no and put me back into another cast, the same position, which was... It was uncomfortable to start with, but you get used to it like anything else. And I could definitely feel myself throughout those 4 weeks regaining a little bit of strength, more so just my fingers were the only thing that could move. So I could feel my fingers were able to grip things a little bit more without pain, which would have been indicative of the common flexor tendon starting to heal. Obviously, I had no idea what was going on with the UCL because there's nothing I could do being fixed that angle that could test it anyway. So at the 4 week mark, went to go see my doc again, who is Dr. Francis Lam. who worked at Gleneagles Hospital, who I actually think did a very good job. There was definitely, it's funny, I think through the process, there was a bit of back and forth. I think Dr. Lam doesn't quite understand what I need and ask of my body on a daily basis, and especially in competition. So I think a lot of the terminology that I would throw out versus what he would throw out, and then when I would tell him the needs that I need for my elbow, what I need it to do, he would like often just find it ridiculous and just like, just don't do that. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going back to that, so I really need it to be stable. I think for him, he was, and you know, I think I agree with it. I found it hard to come to terms with it initially, because other people had been put into braces or slings and didn't have a cast.
Because Brooke Wells had something similar.
Brooke
Simmons
Wells
had something
did
similar.
almost exactly the same injury, but she obviously dislocated it, unfortunately, as well. Jamie Simmons also had a UCL. One of the guys we'll talk about today, Ivan Kuritsev from the Asia region, he actually didn't rupture. He had a partial tear. Didn't have an operation, though. He just had a partial tear and let it heal naturally, or unnaturally, maybe. So yeah, I think for me, like, I was a bit bitter that I was chucked into a 90-degree cast and stuck there, and I felt like it was hindering my progress. But I think it's probably the right thing to do, to be honest, especially with the severity of the incident, and then obviously how, number one, expensive and like financially costly this is, but also if I was to screw it up within that first 4 weeks, then I'm going to have to go into another reconstruction where they would essentially have to take something out my knee to then reconstruct the elbow again, because once it's gone, the second time it ain't coming back. So yeah, that's where I'm at now. Currently, I think for those watching the video, I am almost very close within neutral and pronated of my wrist. I'm almost at full flexion. There's just a little bit of stiffness there. For those that don't know, let's assume like your middle finger was to touch your front rack or your shoulder.
Is that as far as you can flex your elbow?
Mate, my biceps are too big.
I've got huge biceps.
Can you touch your shoulder with your middle finger? Yeah, it's about the same.
Fair enough. Just doesn't look very good from this angle.
I mean, but my right arm's probably missing still another like 10 to 15 degrees of flexion. And then I think in extension, I'm missing probably 20 to 25 degrees still of full extension in the elbow. But it's coming slowly. It's still a little bit swollen. There's no pain in it. I haven't tested anything UCLE. So like with my hand going out away from my body, or like front racks or anything like that, it's not necessary right now. I've started doing isometrics on it. Started trying to open up range of motion. And right now that's the key, is range of motion, trying to get full range back. And that's coming through like really slow, just body weight and very lightweight things, PVC pipes, maybe a couple of light dumbbells, just to work the range I'm currently in. But yeah, I feel like I'm trending in the right direction.
I feel like it's always different when you're someone on the outside watching.
Yeah.
But obviously I've had a lot of operations as well, and I feel like your recovery's actually been pretty quick. I mean, 4 weeks in a cast is not actually too bad, I think, for a pretty major surgery. I mean, elbows are pretty resilient joints.
Yeah.
And I haven't had any elbow issues, touch wood. So I don't have anything to compare it against. But I feel like the process has been quite fast now. Like, you got out of the cast and you're already back to light loading stuff already. Range is already coming back. Obviously, you know, we'll talk about this in a second, but you did a lot of training during, you know, your time in the cast. So it's not like you were sedentary in the body. You know, it was just totally lost everything it had done. So for me, it's actually seemed like a pretty quick journey, and it's cool to see you bouncing back, in my eyes, a lot quicker than I thought you'd be bouncing back. Yeah,
I guess, you know, obviously I had a week after semis, and I think in my head, I was like 99.9% sure I was getting a surgery before I even had the MRI. That just comes from experience. You know, I know you've had plenty in your knees and shoulders, but also like me and my knees as well. Like, I know what my ligament felt like when it went and it ruptured. So they felt the same in my elbow. So, you know, I was kind of like, fingers crossed I don't need one, but I knew if I wanted to get back to where I needed to be, I was going to have to get an op. So that's why as soon as I finished semifinals, you're like, take a deload. I was like, no, I'm going to go like start doing bicep curls and like try grip things as much as I can, because I'm pretty sure my arm is going to be redundant for a good period of time. So I think that's important as well for people who know they're going to get an op, who maybe it's not like a sudden thing, like, you know, maybe an ACL in a sports game or something, but, you know, the prehab stuff that people do is super important to help people bounce back after operations and like major surgeries. But also I think I'm in a pretty good headspace as well. I think being positive and like having positive people around you is something which is really important when it comes to like a hard road to recovery or any I guess any negative period in your life. Like it's certainly not a good thing that I've had to do this, but I can see the silver lining as well. And I feel pretty good, to be honest. I'm not like going off the rails and doing anything like that, and I'm back into my routines, and I've got a good team around me as well. That includes, you know, the team at work, but also doctor, surgeons, physios. So, you know, shout out to your wife, Cami, and Eleanor, who works with us here at Body Shadow. They've been amazing just to even be a point of contact or someone to reference things or ask questions. Eleanor obviously has a lot of manual, has now started the manual work on my elbow. Couldn't do anything when I was in a cast, obviously, but yeah, I feel good. Eleanor actually said she wanted full range back by tomorrow, and I don't think that's going to happen. So the doc said 4 weeks. She said 2. She said she'd like to have it at 2. So I think it's going to be more like 2.5, 3. But yeah, I feel good. I feel positive about it.
And what is like the full recovery timeline for what you've had done?
It depends. So I guess from the day of surgery, it could be anywhere from like 4 months to 8 months. It just depends what your recovery is like. You know, you look at other people, you like look at Brooke Wells, and she made it back
The next year,
yeah, she made it back the next year. Again, like I don't know what her situation was. I know she was very kind and actually offered me some insight into her road to recovery and what she did. Unfortunately, I probably can't do what she did. I think she had like 3 hours of physio 6 days a week, every day or every week. I can't afford to do that. I don't have the means.
You're
to
also
do that.
one of the most resilient people I know, so you never know.
Yeah, I also never know. But you know, she also had an elbow brace on when she dislocated her elbow, so I don't know what was going on there. I felt like I was pretty healthy going into it. But no, I think and I would assume that my recovery is going to be 6 months for me. Yeah, somewhere around there.
Okay, cool. Thank you for the update. I think it's important to just let everyone know where you're currently at. Okay, let's get into the main topic for today. This is all very relevant to this season, and obviously, you know, what you went through at semifinals.
Yeah.
You know, the goal was, as always, to book yourself a ticket back at the CrossFit Games. And then obviously we know that the elbow incident happened second last event, and we didn't end up making it. And then I think it was 2 weeks ago, news broke that 3 out of the top 4 athletes in the Asian semifinals in the men's division tested positive for performance enhancing drugs or banned substances, we'll put it that way. So that means that Ivan Kurisev, who had taken first place, was now no longer going to the CrossFit Games. And that was a backfill spot all the way to 5th place, who has now, we don't know. I don't think we have heard any news yet.
Yeah, I know he's trying to get a visa, I believe.
So potentially could even knock down further if he can't get a visa.
Well, they can't. They would only take up to 5th. They only take 3 from the final. They don't invite after that. So if he doesn't go, then they won't take anyone. It will just
backfill from.
It will just be a 39 place. 39 people at the games.
Cool. Okay, so obviously this is pretty big news.
Yeah.
I think there's I just want to have a conversation about this. I think you and I, when we said last week that we're going to have this conversation, both of us felt that neither of us were very well tuned or well versed with performance enhancements and drugs and testing and all that kind of stuff. I think, you know, we've been involved in sports where it has been prevalent, and, you know, we've been involved in you know, the monitoring process, and we've been tested many times ourselves as rugby players. But I think in the CrossFit space, I don't know, part of me feels like naive and uneducated in the area.
Yeah.
But then another part of me feels like there isn't that much information.
Yeah.
You know, like where one can learn about, you know, how CrossFit tests, what the testing body looks like. How is this different to something like the Asian Games or the Olympics? When are athletes getting tested? How frequently getting tested? All that kind of stuff. And obviously diving into like what are people taking, I think you need to be pretty well versed in all the supplements. So I think the first thing you said to me was, Ed, you need to watch this Hiller video, which is called Hiller. No, it's by Andrew Hiller on YouTube. It's called Failed Drug Tests.
Yeah.
And the whole podcast is really about him digging into what the substances they took were and a bit more information about them, because he is quite well versed in the topic of steroids, and he He doesn't pretend that he's not.
Yeah.
You know, he is, if
He's
anyone
also
knows,
sponsored by
he's
California
sponsored by
Peptide.
California
Performance.
Peptide. Yeah.
Performance,
So he's been very open and honest.
Yeah.
CrossFit have also banned him from taking part in the Open because he was so open and honest about it. But he's also been an advocate for it, right?
Yeah.
He's not hiding around it. And I really appreciate his honesty there. So what he did was put out this video just talking openly about what these guys are taking and basically giving his 2 cents on, you know, their appeal process, you know, how realistic is this appeal? You know, he even goes into things like he goes back into their Instagrams and goes back 2 years and he's like, this is clear evidence that he's been using this for a while, blah, blah, blah. And then I thought what was quite cool is one of his listeners is basically chirping him on the video saying, just get me on your video. I'm a pretty well versed in all this stuff. I can shed more light on it. So eventually in the video, 10 minutes later, Hiller kind of cracks, gets this guy on who's actually a guy in the CrossFit space, you know, works with OPEX, is more of just a real enthusiast and just loves this stuff. And then they get into kind of the weeds of the different drugs and, you know, the application and use, like, you know, some of these things are pills, some of the things you got to inject, the actual realistic timelines that people probably been using these things. And I think that episode alone really upgraded my understanding of all of this. I still feel very novice and I still have a lot of questions. But where are you at, like, you know, in terms of your knowledge and understanding of like drugs in sport, especially in CrossFit, like where's your level of understanding?
Oh God. I'll be honest, when you said you wanted to do a podcast on it, I like shat myself and then like started going to all these YouTube videos to try and like upgrade and upskill my knowledge on it. I think number one, I feel very naive to the whole I guess culture of taking maybe like any sort of performance enhancing drugs, whether that's like an anabolic steroid or that's a peptide or whatever it is. I feel very naive, and I guess because I always felt naive, I always shied away from learning about it or trying to understand anything about it.
But I mean, would you think one would learn about it unless they had intention to take it?
Well, that's the thing. Now that it's like it seems like so many people do it. I feel like it would be silly not to learn and educate myself about it. I think. So just to jump in there, do you mean that because it's becoming more prevalent that more people than we originally thought are taking it, it's worth educating yourself to see whether it might be something that could even be a possibility for me to take? You mean?
Yeah.
Oh, no, not that way. It's more like when people say, they come up to me and they ask me, how do you feel about it? And I can give them my honest opinions of how I feel. And then they go like, oh, well, what was he even taking? I go, oh, I don't know. And I start mumbling and I can do what I used to do in conversation, which is just make some bollocks up, but that doesn't help anyone. So trying to like actually educate myself on it has made me feel a little bit more informed, but still, like, I look at some of these words and I can't even pronounce them, so I don't even know what the hell they are. So being able to watch actually Andrew Hiller's videos have actually been very helpful. I got that steroid, I think it's
steroid.com.
And just clicking on that, and it tells you what they are and why people might use them. Things like what's it called, the half-life of like when it leaves your system and how long that takes. And I don't know, I had no idea. When I would read why some people got popped for things, it would say metabolites. I just thought that was the drugs in the system or the substance in the system. It turns out that can, if the half-life is only 2 months, it could actually still be there 2 years later, and stuff like that. I just honestly had no idea about it. So it's been interesting to learn. And I think another reason why I want to learn about it is, we are both coaches in the health and fitness industry, and I have some clients who take peptides. They take them themselves, and it's their choice. And again, I didn't know much about it. So I think being in the position I'm in, if I'm training them in a certain way, or they're recovering from an injury, or whatever the case might be, fill in the blank, I felt like I needed to upskill myself in some way, shape, or even if it's just small. But I wanted to learn about it. And one thing I did do is actually the day after I woke up from my operation, I actually asked my surgeon, I said, like, can you tell me about BPC 157? And I said TB 500. He said, it's TB 4. And I said, okay. So it immediately made me feel stupid that I got it wrong. And he basically just wiped it all off. He's like, no, like, I don't want to talk about that stuff. And I kind of pushed him on it a little bit because, again, I know people who have taken both those two peptides via injections and have seen like really good improvements from an injury standpoint. So they've had operations on certain areas of their body and they've taken this and they've had like really good results. So
and also BPC 157 was until very recently wasn't a banned substance. So yeah, I think it only got added to the banned substances list in the last 12 to 15 months.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I was asking about that, but even him, he was like, it's not available in Hong Kong. There's nowhere, you can't get it anywhere. Like, don't even bother asking me about it. And I was just genuinely just curious because, again, I'd been doing research on it. I definitely know that I can't afford it with how much it costs. But I know you can get it in Hong Kong, for example. I know you can get it places. So yeah, just having to wanting to upskill myself on it, I guess, has been the only reason I know a tiny bit more than
I think that. So for those who are listening, if they're interested in, I mean, so a lot of times when a professional athlete gets test positive, it will be publicly declared what the substance they were taking was.
Yeah.
So if you are a sports fan and there are athletes within your sport who are getting popped, out of your own interest, what you can do is go into steroid.com. You just type in the name of the drug. You'll find it there, and then you click on it and it'll have all the details. So like you said, half-life or time taken to get out the system, what the benefits are, why one might take it, what the side effects are. So it's actually a pretty useful website. I haven't really dove into it, but obviously learned a lot about the drugs that the four guys in Asia all tested positive for, and what the potential benefits of those drugs were. A lot of those being around recovery, but a lot of them also being around like muscle mass and weight gain
and mass.
And there was, again, I'm not educated in this, and I don't have any merit to be really talking about this kind of stuff, but just repeating what I've heard from other experts. SARMs, which is something that's been popping up a lot, because I think that was Ricky Garrard was the first one got tested for that. He served a 4-year ban, and that was all the word SARMs. Until that point in time, I'd never even heard of it. But I think now a lot of them are saying that SARMs and CrossFit, not really good combination, and there's just a lot of ill side effects long term that unless you're getting these things prescribed from doctors, like don't mess around with it, type thing. That is just the general takeaway. Have you heard the same?
Yeah, I mean, again, I like you said, I watched the Hiller video, and that's what they talk about in that as well.
I wanted to quickly interrupt this episode with a quick shout out to our sponsors, Today Well Spent. I've been using this journal for 2 years, and it has made a massive impact on my physical, but mostly my mental well-being. It is a guided journal backed by neuro and behavioral science, which I actually didn't know at the time. It has questions for you to answer at the start of the day, at the end of the day, end of every week, end of every month. And it's brought so much self-awareness to me of the things that positively and negatively impact my life. So if you're someone who cares about your physical and your mental well-being, which I think you do because you listen to this podcast, then go and grab yourself a Today Well Spent. Use the discount code THEPROCESS, one word in capitals, to get your discount. Okay, so I want to ask you, you recently got asked by the Morning Chalk Up to kind of, I guess, share an opinion on it. This was so pretty soon after the 4 athletes got done. You had reposted the story and your quote was heartbroken. Can you explain what that meant?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, obviously you can read into that 2 ways. Like I said, you could read in it, number one, being heartbroken for the athletes. It was not that. It was honestly, I feel like more heartbroken for the state of Asian CrossFit and what it kind of shows the rest of the world. I think Asian CrossFit probably gets a pretty bad rap anyway. When you look at like the European region and Northwest and East regions who may be stronger, or we know are stronger, and Asia still gets 2 qualifying spots, and then this sort of thing happens where maybe Ivan was going to do really well at the games. Who knows? Like, drugs or no drugs. Like, maybe he does really well at the games and puts a really good showing in for Asia because he's representing Asia at the end of the day. And maybe Semenov does the same. That's great. But as soon as you get like 3 of the top 4 get popped, you're now looking at someone who's in 5th place, who is already 3 spots away from qualifying and a fair way away on the leaderboard. And I'm not saying that Makarov's not going to be any good. He might be amazing at the games and like maybe made for the games versus not being so good at quarterfinal, semifinal events. But let's be honest again, like his preparation's been shorter than everyone else's. He's going to have to get a visa. There's a lot of extra stresses, a lot of money that he's got to spend to get there. His process of training for the games is going to be a lot less ideal than other people. So he's probably not going to have a great showing at the games. And then especially when you look at like the strength of field, things that they do now that might lose a spot for Asia. That's one thing. Of course.
So what you're saying is that because now we're going to get even weaker representation at the CrossFit Games, it may be in the future with this new, strength of, what's it called again?
Strength of field.
Strength of field. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Which is basically almost like a fantasy league system that they used to basically rank CrossFitters throughout multiple years.
I think they only did 1 to 100.
Yeah. 1 to 100. Yeah. So potentially that's going to hurt Asia even more. Potentially could mean that we lose. We've already, we can lose another qualifying spot. Like we already lost one team qualifying spot.
Correct.
For the games this year.
Yeah. And again, that probably won't go so well this year because the first team in Asia couldn't even get a visa. So that means that the second team, which is Mayhem Black, which is Carlos, Marvel Black, sorry, not Mayhem Black. Again, their preparation would have been cut short and probably, likelihood is not going to be a great showing at the CrossFit Games, unfortunately. I think the other thing I think it's heartbreaking is spectators. I think spectators obviously pay money to go to places like Busan. They pay money to keep up with the season. And it sucks when you can't. For them, they're like, oh, let's say we're talking about Koreans. They want, the best Koreans in the top heat. And they want to see them competing and able to compete at the CrossFit Games. And when you got three guys there who are basically taking away spots from people like, the Korean athletes, and that's not good for the spectators. The fact that they're getting done, so many of them getting done, is that going to ruin spectatorship in the long run, which will obviously affect financials for any of the semifinal hosts. I think things like sponsorship of those athletes, like it just breaks the trust with all the brands that they might be working with. I know some brands will stick by their athletes for the 4-year sanction if they end up losing the appeal. But most
the drug companies sponsoring their gear are going to be stoked.
But otherwise, those brands are going to pull the pin as well and maybe be reluctant to invest in the CrossFit space again. So that's not good for other athletes. And again, I think it's just heartbreaking. Like this is the first year that, for me personally, I ever even spoke to Ivan, and he was a really good dude. He's a really nice guy. Like we had a little chat together. He did a little interview with me on his vlog, which I really appreciated, and that was nice. And wished him luck before every single event. And this is the same. I feel, what's his name, NASA. 3 years ago when he popped as well, like he was the only guy I spoke to at semifinals because I couldn't really communicate with anyone else because no one really spoke English at the time, and we were having some good banter back and forth. And then 3 weeks later, he pops, and you're just like, I don't know. I shouldn't really take it personally because it's got nothing to do with how I communicate. It doesn't make him different as the person that actually spoke to me. But I just feel like maybe that person's not trustworthy now.
And you question their integrity.
And it just kind of leaves a bit. I guess the thing is just a bitter taste in my mouth is more than anything. It doesn't make me hate the person. Doesn't make me wish bad for the person. It's just like, oh, that's a bit of a bummer. I thought he was maybe a bit different. But I don't know. If you feel like it's in any sport now, and in any and every sport where there's prize money, where there's media, where there's sponsorships, like people will do anything to get to the top. And I can understand it. I've been in the sport now for like 11 and 12 years. And there are certainly some days where I sit here and go, fuck, I'm so weak. Like there's got to be something that's going to help me get better at this faster. Like my timeline's running out. I'm turning 35 this year. Like I got to be able to, is there something that I can do which is just going to help me? Maybe it's not the top of the world at the CrossFit Games coming first, but something that it's going to help me out locally, regionally, which would certainly help my profile and, help push me somewhere. Like the thoughts definitely crossed my mind. Absolutely. It has. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't think I could ever bring myself to.
Well, that was my question. Is that, when those thoughts have crossed your mind, because I'm sure that every person that does take it, it starts with a thought that crosses their mind.
Yeah.
And then some act on that and action it and some don't. So what is the thing that has stopped you from going ahead and making that decision?
I don't know. I guess the fact that I have been able to get there before without it. I don't know. And also the fact that I've played rugby to the highest level, you know, in World Cups, and we've competed as I know it's not an individual sport, and like you're not necessarily showcasing your individual prowess as an athlete, but I've competed at the highest level in that sport and at this sport without the use of it. So like, there's got to be a way to do it. And I appreciate hard work and I understand hard work. And I don't know, I just feel like the human body can get there. But then at the end of the day, I don't know if every world record ever broken at the Olympics and every single record that's been broken in CrossFit has been done by a clean athlete or let's call it a dirty athlete. I just don't know. So it's a hard one. It's just like a moral battle within your head, right?
I think personally for me, and I haven't had like my athlete hat on for a very long time. Yeah. So I think that, when I was chasing the athlete dream, I don't think, especially in CrossFit, drugs didn't, my perception of CrossFit was that it was a cleaner sport.
Yeah.
But I also know that the level of testing back in 2014, 15, 16 was much lower than what it is right now. There was a much smaller pool of athletes. So competition for places was nowhere near as fierce as it is now. The money back in 2014, 15, 16, the sponsorships, prize money was much lower. So there's a lot less pressure for people to want to get better. So I know it can't really compare apples and oranges, but I just think for me, it's my moral compass to know that if I would take it, I would just have to be open and honest about it, which would then mean I wouldn't be able to be a top tier athlete, and collect prize money and take spots at CrossFit Games. But I guess then there's the other part to this, which is, and I want to talk about this now, which is the way that CrossFit tests right now is only the top athlete gets punished, right? So I think the top 5 at semifinals this year in Asia are the only ones that got tested, which means that if your goal is you just want to be a semi-final athlete and you just want to make it there, but you have no intention of finishing in the top 10, then it's a pretty safe bet for you, I would say, that you could probably go ahead and just start taking whatever you want, and the likelihood of you being tested and thus caught is very low. So if your moral compass can handle it, there is a very low likelihood in how CrossFit works, from at least our understanding right now, that you're actually going to get caught.
Yeah, and I think,
and that's messed up, because now, sorry to cut you off, but that means that when you look at the leaderboard at the end of a competition, the only legitimate places that, when I say legitimate, is that you've earned that spot through playing by the rules of the sport. You can only really say that the top 5 are the only legitimate spots.
Yeah,
because that means technically, and we're not. Again, like, I am someone that assumes positive intent with everything in life. So I don't look at athletes and assume that they're on it. I think that's just something that I just assume that people have achieved it through natural hard grit and genetics, etc. But really what that technically means, if you're not testing everyone, that means from 6 downwards, it could potentially be all dirty, which means that, the placings could not be legitimate.
Yeah. For sure. And I guess in the morning chalk up article, Emily Beers asked me, she said, like, what's your solution? I said, I actually don't have a solution because I know how expensive and, like, how much of a financial burden it is to even have, will they use drug-free or drug-in sport? CrossFit, drug-free sport? I think it is.
I think it's drug-free.
Drug-free sport, yeah.
That rings a bell, but I think you've got it there in front of you.
Yeah, I'll find out in a sec. It's either drug-free or drug-in sport. I've been tested by both.
Okay, so let's go into that now then.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I think let's rewind a little bit. So when we were playing for the Hong Kong rugby team, and with rugby being an Asian Games sport at the time, it's now an Olympic sport, of course. Yeah. But Asian Games being sanctioned by the Olympics meant that the level of drug testing as an Asian Game team was of the highest level. So as a squad of 12. We were listed on the Whereabouts. The Whereabouts is basically software, which when I think about it now seems ancient, but basically a software that when
I tell you what the CrossFit one is, you're going to say it's even more ancient than that.
Okay, anyhow, so there's this, you had to log on to the system and you had to provide exactly where you were going to be basically every week of the whole year.
Yeah.
So at any point in time, the drug testing committee could arrive at your doorstep or at your work or wherever you are and test. And actually there was times where I know certainly they arrived at home.
I missed 3 tests.
You missed 3 tests, right? Because you weren't weren't where you were when you said you were. Because I mean, and also just how this works, you can imagine, like, you're 21-year-old and don't really have a job. or your job is kind of all over the place. I was a strength and conditioning coach, so I'm driving around town. I don't really know where I'm going to be in 7 months time from now. So very often these kind of things happened, and you kind of got 3 strikes and then there's a big fine or a potential ban coming up. So anyway, I think we were exposed as rugby players to probably one of the highest levels of testing, right? So for me, that seemed really comprehensive, and I was like, wow, it gave me confidence to know that, okay, this is a level of testing that they're doing for someone like Hong Kong. Then, I imagine that, bigger nations are going through and maybe potentially an even more stringent policy on testing. And at competitions and events, we would regularly get asked to, provide urine samples for testing as well. So obviously coming from that background and experiencing that to now being in CrossFit, I've never been tested in sport CrossFit because I probably never achieved, the level of excellence that one would question that I might be on something or need to question.
50 kg snatch at regionals wasn't enough.
That's true. It was 55 actually, and I missed that. Right. I missed it. So can you tell us, like, in all your years, so since 2014 competing your first regionals up until now, how many times have you been tested, and where was that?
Twice. I got tested the first time at the 2019 games. That was the asterisk year when they had national champions. So I got tested when I got cut after Mary. I was basically walking off the competition floor in the what do you call that?
The arena, stadium.
Yeah, what do they call it? Not a tennis stadium.
No.
Anyway, the one in Wisconsin.
It was a tennis stadium, but yeah,
the one in Wisconsin. I was walking out of there, and the guy pulled me aside and said, "We need to test you." I said, "Cool." So that was my first one. Now I'll talk about my experience about it in a sec. And I'm pretty sure that was drugs in sport, maybe. Now it's drug-free sport. So I also got tested last year at the semifinals because I finished 3rd in the semifinals in Busan in Asia, Korea. And I didn't get tested at the games.
And that was immediately after.
That was immediately after, and that was due to a podium finish for me, but they test the top 5. So the one I got tested at the games in 2019, that was a random test. I just got chosen out of everyone. And since I qualified for the games last year, I've been included into the testing pool. So the testing pool doesn't actually say, so I'm on their drug testing policy. And the testing pool actually doesn't mean you have to have been to the games before. They just basically choose who goes into the testing pool, right?
Are there any people who are in the testing pool that haven't been to the games?
I don't know. I don't think
it's not publicly declared.
I'm not sure. But yeah, so the testing pool is basically chosen by them, by CrossFit. So I'm in that. So I recently did what you just said, the whereabouts, and WADA is the one that we use for rugby, which is the World Anti-Doping Association, which is probably the biggest one. That's the Olympics, that's the IRB, that does all the biggest ones. So drug-free sport, I'm not sure if drug-free sport makes this or CrossFit does, but I got sent a Google form to complete, and I literally had to fill in 5 to 6 lines, and that was it.
So just random times. They picked the times that you had to decide, dictate where you were? State where you were.
Yeah, it said, give us your home address, I think it was, and where you would be at these times. So it was very, like, WADA was comprehensive. This is a Google form, and I'm not filling in a calendar or anything. I'm just typing it in. So you can imagine they're probably getting different answers in different languages, and like it would be a mess then to sort out. So I don't know how they do that. But yeah, so I'm in the testing pool. I've never been randomly tested outside of competition. In CrossFit, I've never been tested outside. I had done many times when I was playing rugby, at competitions, out of competitions. God, the amount of times they would knock on my door at 5:30 a.m. because that was the earliest you could put it, and everyone just put it as 5:30 a.m. assuming you're going to be asleep, and it would be like Sunday morning. And as soon as the drug tester, the invigilator they called it, knocked on your door once, you had exactly an hour to open the door. And if you didn't open it in that time, which I didn't twice because I was hungover and just like sleeping in bed, like you said, like a 21-year-old just being on a night out, I've essentially missed and got a black mark for my drug test. My 3rd one that I actually missed, I was on tour with the Hong Kong B team. I got a last minute call up because they had an injury, and I didn't update my WADA because actually our coach always updated the full season schedule for us, and we basically just copied it across, right? And obviously the B team one wasn't on my schedule, my roster originally, and I had to fly in like a 24-hour window. and they just happened to turn up to training at King's Park in Hong Kong where the A team was, where I was supposed to be, and I wasn't there. And I got a 3rd black mark. I can't remember what my punishment was though.
I remember when it happened. Like
I had to show up to do something every week for 2 months, but I can't remember what I just provided urine samples every single week. But that was obviously fine. I didn't test for anything. But yeah, I think that just shows how much more serious WADA was. Also, after the 2019 games, again, I'm not sure if CrossFit has changed the external company that they hire to do the drug testing, but at 2019, the way in which it was tested was to me, it seemed like a joke. So WADA was like, okay, you sit in this room, you don't talk to anyone, you don't touch anything, you sit in your chair, and when you're ready to piss, you got 1 shot to do it. And if you don't fill it up to the line, you chuck that sample away and you start again. That's how WADA always did it. And the guy literally stands there and stares at your cock and balls as you pull it out in the toilet.
Or your vagina.
Sure. Yeah. And just stares at you while you do it, which is quite uncomfortable, but it is what it is, and it takes a few seconds. And in 2019, so I was under I remember watching Noah Olsen and Matt Fraser on the TV with the invigilators who were sitting there eating pizza, which is obviously probably a bit of a no-no when they're handling like my substance and my piss and touching my sample bottles and stuff like that. Anyways, I was tired after a workout, and I was like sitting there thinking that I had to fill this up in like a one-hit wonder, and I just didn't need to piss. Like, as anyone knows who has done a drug test, especially a random one, you piss about 1 million times before. As soon as you're asked to test, you then just can't piss.
And you just finished a workout. Typically,
you don't hard workout.
Yeah, you don't need to.
AMRAP, yeah. So I remember I was downing Coca-Cola, I was downing fizzy drinks, I was downing a shitload of water, and just nothing was going into my bladder. Obviously, eventually I was like, okay, cool, I think I have enough now to do a piss. So I go up to the guy and said, I think I'm ready. He's like, oh, you need a piss now? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I don't know if it's going to be enough to cover the line. He's like, oh, if it's not, just put the sample down the side and go fill it up again later. I was like, oh, I don't have to tip it away. He's like, no, you can just keep adding to it. If you need to piss 5 times to get it over the line, that's fine. And I was like, well, what do I do in the meantime? He's like, I'll just put some cling film over the top. And to me, I was like, this.
So you could walk around that sample, do whatever you want.
Yeah, so you could do whatever the hell you wanted. And I was like, okay. So then I was like, I'm ready to go now. He's like, yeah, toilet's just around the corner. I was like, you coming with me? He's like, no. I was like, okay. So I just went. I could have just turned the tap on and put water in there for all he cared. So I went around the corner anyway, just did it, and I was well over the line. Came back and screwed it all up, signed it all off, and he's like, yeah, A sample, B sample, done. If you get a letter from us, you're in trouble. If you don't hear from us, you're good. And I was like, fuck, that's pretty anxiety inducing. Like, I'm just going to be waiting to maybe get an email from you guys, or just maybe not. I was like, what's the timeline? He's like, oh, it just depends on like where you sit, how many athletes we end up testing over this weekend, but you might be like number 1, you might be number 40, for example. I was like, Jesus, this is not great. Anyways, didn't get an email back. I still got that piece of paper just in case I ever got the email. And then in 2023, when I tested in Busan, this is what makes me think it was a different body of testing, but it was a lot more stringent. There was only one person, so the whole process, you were waiting on the competition floor, took like 3 or 4 hours. It was so long. But no, they came up to the toilet with us. They were looking over the shoulder and monitoring everything. It had to be a one-hit wonder. You couldn't like refill it. So yeah, that's a good sign that they're obviously investing, or at least taking it a bit more seriously.
So I think maybe this is a good place for us to jump in and say that, you're saying, okay, different organizations might have done the testing in 2019 versus 2023. Yeah. So I think from our understanding is there's just different tiers of testing bodies that a sport can employ to ensure that their sport is as drug-free as possible. Mm. So USADA, I think, is that the name of the top one?
WADA and USADA.
WADA and USADA. Are those two different things?
I think USADA does UFC, yeah.
Is it USADA's UFC? Okay, so anyway, let's say you've got those that test the Olympics, right? Which is going to be the most stringent testing.
WADA, yeah.
That's WADA, yeah. And then basically you think of it as you got different levels, and I'm assuming that with each level down, the price is reduced, but the comprehensiveness of the testing is also reduced.
Yeah.
So I guess as a sport, you're looking to make your sport legitimate and trying to increase the efficacy of your sport, then you have to have some form of drug testing in there. But I guess to the public's knowledge, what they see is that the sport is testing for drugs.
Yeah.
But what we don't know is the level of comprehensiveness of the testing. So I think, you just given us a bit of an insight into what it's like. You're an athlete who has qualified to the games 3 times, competed at the games twice, competed at regionals every year, have been a top 10 Asian athlete every single year. And throughout 10 years of competing, you've only been tested twice.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of gives us a bit of an insight into what it's like. But I do know that Tammy, and maybe you can share, Tammy, who competed in the games in 2013, I think it was, or was it 14? Where she finished on the podium with the team, and then never really competed in CrossFit after that. Remained in their testing list, I think, for multiple years after that.
I think that she's only probably just not got the whereabouts email maybe last year. But yeah, she hadn't signed up to the Open for like 5 years. And she was still a part of their testing pool. So again, I don't know.
And so what do you take from that? That they're not monitoring their testing pool closely?
Well, I don't know. Maybe either that, or
they think she's just so jacked that
they think she's taking some. She's
taking an 8-year hiatus.
But I also don't know how many times she got tested. I've never seen her get tested. I think a funny story that I heard, and I won't use the names of the people, but I was at a competition. Again, I was quite new to CrossFit. The competition was DFC, back when it was called DFC back in the day. This was the second year I did it. You were there, and I was sitting on the bus going to the swimming event, which was out in the middle of a desert somewhere. And there was a conversation happening between guys who I really looked up to in the CrossFit space. All very, very big names within CrossFit at the time. And they were all just having like a very nonchalant conversation about drugs in the sport. And I remember one of them saying, he's like, "Oh, we all know your brother who used to compete in the sport, not you, this guy they're talking to. We all know your brother was told by CrossFit to sit out for 2 years because he popped when they tested him. So they told him to sit out, and that's why he came back 2 years later." And then another comment was thrown by saying, "Oh, we all know that this happened to this guy, and that's why that happened." I'm sitting there like, I don't know, I would have been like 24, 25. And I'm sitting there like kind of, when you're the awkward person on the side, just kind of like laughing along because they're all laughing and having a good time. I'm like, I have no idea what these guys are talking about. And I feel like a complete loser because I'm so far away and like so naive to this whole topic. I thought all these guys were clean. I thought all these guys were just crushing it and doing the same thing as me. And they're all way more knowledgeable than I am on the subject. And they're all just like freely talking about it. And they have what seemed to me like these links to CrossFit, which like they had insider information to stuff. And I've never heard of any of this stuff before. And I felt like I was fairly well versed in it. But yeah, like those sorts of situations where I was in just made me feel, and it's probably the reason why honestly I've never really looked into it, because I feel like I'm such an outsider with it all. And I don't know.
So up until this point in time, before this news was broken, do you look at other athletes in the sport, whether they're the same level as you or better than you or worse or at lower levels than you? And do you genuinely look at these people through the lens that you think everyone has taken it, or do you still look at people through the lens that you think that everyone is clean and doing the same thing that you're doing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I genuinely don't think it crosses my mind until I see something aesthetically on the person, which might make me question it. And again, like I don't even know what that is. Is it like a spotty back? Is it a
big delts?
Yeah, massive
distended
delts.
Bellies.
Yeah, like
that's
huge
all the
jawlines.
Those are all
that
the common
stuff.
things. Losing hair.
Yeah, like I don't know, and I don't think about it until I see that stuff, and then I'm like, ooh, like how much is he cleaning and deadlifting and squatting? Okay, he's like cleaning like 500 pounds. Yeah, this guy's, whatever. But yeah, honestly, I don't think it crosses my mind much. I think, you see a leaderboard. A lot of the time you don't actually see the person, especially within the Asian community, because like I might not follow another athlete because I can't understand what they're posting on their stuff. So I might not follow them. And like one year you see them and they're like not making semis, and the next year you see them and they're like crushing semis. Sometimes you might go have like a little poke around investigation and be like, okay, this guy has put on like 50 kg in his back squat, 30 kg in his snatch, and 30 kg in his clean and jerk.
What a mayhem do. It's a mayhem program.
Yeah. Well, then I think straight away, I'm like, fuck. Like, is he doing something? And I'm honestly, I think 9 times out of 10, I give them the benefit of the doubt and say, no, they're not. They just work really damn hard.
I would say,
a lot of people are turning into these full-time athletes now, which like it gives you a much better chance to be able to do that stuff. I don't know if you need the help all the time, but yeah,
I don't know. I would say that I'm almost 10 out of 10. I assume that people just doing good, honest, hard work.
Yeah.
And it's naturally achieved results. I very rarely think or even assume that they might be cheating. I know a lot of people in the sport who take the immediate stance that others are cheating, and that's the only way that they can be achieving X, Y, and Z or being as big as they are. But again, I think that also comes down to my ignorance and naivety on knowing what to even possibly look for.
Yeah.
You know, so I think watching Andrew Hiller's video, you know, where he's talking, you know, what he did, he basically went to the 3 guys who got, the 4 guys who got caught in that first week of semifinals. And, you know, we're still awaiting results right now, so there could be more. And he said, okay, really easy way for me to know if this was like, you know, an accidental slip up in the supplement or someone was consciously taking this for a prolonged period of time. I'm just going to go into their Instagram. So he goes into their Instagram and he just scrolls back a couple of years. And then, you know, he starts, he's saying it with confidence, of course, because that's kind of what he does. It's what makes it entertaining viewing. But he's, you know, he's going back a few years and he's like, well, look, like this is a fully grown adult. And look, he has hair. He is like 8 kilograms less in terms of lean muscle mass. But at the same time, I'm looking at that being like, but you don't know what he was doing at that period of time. You know, maybe he wasn't. I've seen people have ridiculous transformations in a year as fully grown adults when they just clean up their nutrition, they sleep a bit more, and they train a little bit harder, or they train a bit smarter. No, but like genuinely, without that, you know, like I've seen people do it in a very pure way where people look at them and say, oh, they must be on steroids.
Yeah.
And, you know, as their coach, and I'm like, genuinely, like this person is so far away from that potentially being the case. But, you know, I have seen it so many times, and because I've seen it so many times, I just assume that no one's doing it. And I think maybe if I educate myself more, I think even educate myself more, it's just Instagram is so hard to use as a judging platform. Like you have no idea what that person was going through at that period of time in their life, what their training was looking like, what their nutrition was looking like, what their eating was looking like. There are obviously, I think, extreme cases where it's very obvious. You know, like whether it's skin, it's jawlines, it's hair, it's like body's completely changing. I mean, if you watch bodybuilding shows, like that for me is probably a more extreme version of what a lot of obvious substance use looks like. But I don't know, it's now a time where I'm thinking, okay, I want to upskill myself in the understanding of this a little bit more. But then at the same time, how's that going to benefit me? You know, it will benefit me potentially, like you said, as a coach, where I can start to understand any clients that are taking it. I can just understand what physiologically might be changing their body, how I need to adjust training volume, intensity, etc. But I also don't want to start looking at life and these other athletes through the lens that I think they're all cheating. Like exactly. That's not a place that I want to exist out of. So sometimes ignorance is bliss. It's better, you know, the less you know sometimes is better, I think, in terms of, you know, the way that I might perceive the world around me.
Yeah, I'm the same. That's why I said like 9 times out of 10, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and just, I guess it's like an innocent until proven guilty is the kind of.
So, okay, so my question that I just asked you, which was, you know, previously up until this point, did you look at athletes and think that they were genuine, they were natural or using? And you said no, 9 times out of 10, you'd assume that it was good, honest, hard work. After what has just happened, especially, and I don't mean, this is a massive generalization. This is a huge generalization, but, you know, Russia in Olympic sports has been notorious for having a pretty extensive history of drug use. We know that the Asian region is dominated by Russian athletes now. So it's just putting 2 and 2 together. It's very hard to not create that link. And given that, you know, only 5 athletes were tested, 4 of them being, well, actually all 5 were Russian. Yeah, all 5 Russian, and 4 of them, well, 3 of them testing positive.
They also tested the teams though, and there's 4 Russian athletes in the teams, and they all, I assume, passed clear. Okay, true. So as I said, this was not assuming that all Russian athletes are. But does this now change how you look at
at other CrossFitters, but specifically other CrossFitters who are your competition. So, your goal to get to CrossFit Games every year, thinking about the people you have to compete against, does this now change the way that you view them? In the sense that they might be taking performance enhancement.
No, I don't think so. No, I still assume the best in people, I think. Yeah, I don't think it does. I don't ever want to assume the worst out of people anyway. Maybe that makes me naive. Maybe some people will look at me and be like, you're an idiot. Like, they're clearly doing it, but I don't.
But what does that change?
Yeah,
anyway?
Exactly. It doesn't change anything. At the end of the day, if they're better than me and they beat me and they get the ticket or whatever it is I'm looking for, then fine. And if you get caught, then unlucky. I don't know. Like I said, I don't think there's a solution to it that's going to make me change my mind on how I see people, unless it's like, okay, 40 people are qualifying to semifinals. 3 weeks before, everyone's going to get drug tested, and then you're going to compete at semifinals in the top 5, then get drug tested again. That'd be amazing, but it's just not possible, especially in a region like Asia.
It's also very tough because we're just talking about semifinals, but
yeah,
you can have loads of people doing it at quarterfinals. And then you have, clean athletes not make it to semis because athletes, again, I'm thinking this is me projecting worst case scenarios and assuming the worst.
And it's also hard as well because if they have this testing pool, the testing pool, I guess, is the only thing that dictates you out of competition or out of season tests, right? And if someone like a Kuliev or a Borisenko or a Kuritsev essentially hasn't gotten that near to qualifying, they wouldn't be in the testing pool. So they could do it all year round. I'm not saying they do, but they could do it all year round, get to semifinal stage and stop, but they didn't. So they got, or they maybe did. I don't know. Maybe the metabolites got popped up and that's the reason why they got caught, but they're not in the testing pool. So they're not going to get tested outside of it, which is why, again, I didn't have a solution to offer because it's ridiculously expensive.
Okay, so let's wrap this up by talking about solutions.
Yeah.
So I think maybe the somewhat naive, but also like maybe the unrealistic solution here is that you just, as a company, CrossFit, if you want to really legitimize a sport, because I think this is what we're talking about, right? Why is testing even important? Number one, it's making it a fair playing field for all the athletes, but I think also public perception, right? Legitimizing the sport. They're already, just because of the way that CrossFitters look, I would probably say CrossFit is one of those sports that the public outside who have any knowledge around steroids and performance enhancing drugs assume that CrossFit is just a dirty sport.
Yeah.
Right. I think I've heard that so much since I've entered this space. So, maybe the unrealistic solution is that just pay for the highest level of testing. Anyone who qualifies for, this is where like the line is, like, now that the quarterfinals is the top 25%, like that is a huge amount of athletes that would have to then enter the testing pool. Is that realistic? Really, if it's maybe just thinking about where prize money comes into it, maybe it has to be semifinals and above. But actually then even the open, there's prize money for event wins.
Yeah.
And there's no testing that happens unless you happen to be an athlete on the testing pool.
Yeah.
So, maybe the unrealistic solution right now is that, all semifinal athletes, team and individuals, are tested and put into the testing pool and are tested periodically year round.
Yeah.
But what are, as an athlete, like what would give you at least some peace of mind to know that the organization CrossFit is stepping up their actions in trying to make it more fair and drug free? So where's like the sweet spot for you right now? If you know that is the end dream goal of what we'd like to eventually achieve, what's the next step?
I don't know. I don't have this. I think honestly, my solution in my head, and this could be completely ridiculous, would be
let everyone take it.
No, yeah, maybe if it's accessible, but at the start of the season, and make the start of the season early. So as soon as the games finishes, you start the season, and you have to sign up to the Open a month after the games. Let's say, right? At the point of you signing up to the CrossFit Open, you need to tick a box that says that you're going to try and qualify for the CrossFit Games. right? So you have the intention of going to the CrossFit Games, which means that you're probably going to be a half decent athlete.
But what if athletes just don't tick that box?
Okay, so if you don't tick the box and then you make it through to the next stage, you're not allowed to go to the next stage.
Yeah.
Right? So that's immediately going to
ramifications.
start, yes, it starts to narrow down the field a little bit more to who might get tested. So you can still get to semifinals without having ticked that box because you might be a 40th out of 40th level athlete. And that's okay. You're probably not going to get tested then. And I'm not saying that that's a good protocol to take because the 40th placed athlete by the end of the weekend at semis might still take a first place in an event and then come dead last in every other event. And that still takes points off the cards for other people.
Yeah.
But if they didn't tick that box at the beginning, then they don't go into the testing pool, out of competition testing pool. And if you tick that box in October or, a date after the August CrossFit Games, then that gives CrossFit a long window to actually start testing these people. Now, of course.
And then would these be randomized drug tests?
That has to be randomized. They're just literally like spin a wheel of fortune and put your finger on it and find that
But I think
person.
if athletes knew that there were random drug tests taking place, it would make them.
And if you tick
twice.
that box, you have the potential to get tested.
Yeah.
I actually think now I've said that and verbalized that, that's quite a good way to do it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So then basically, are you saying that there needs to be more testing? Are you saying that the semi-final athletes who all tick, so basically every athlete that ticks a box just has a potential to be tested?
Yeah.
Or that they are all mandatory tested when they get to something like the semi-finals?
Potential to get tested. And I think when you get to semi-finals, you should be tested. I don't know what the costs look like though. So you might show me the cost of Asian testing right now and be like, it is $1 million US. And if we do everyone, it is going to be $10 million US. So, but okay, obviously that's not a feasible solution. It has to be something else, but I don't know what those costs are.
Does this, with more people getting tested every year, and of course, this could be that they're catching more people because the level of testing is increasing, and therefore, more drugs are being tested every year relative to previous years. But does the fact that there are more drug people getting popped in the sport, does that make you worried for the sport of CrossFit in the future? I know you've talked about the downsides immediately and how it's affected you, but does it make you fear for the future of the sport?
I think if the sport grows, so like the financials grow as well, and sponsorships grow, and the media grows, naturally, the drug testing should grow as well. So if that occurs, and I have kind of witnessed that happening, then I think they're doing as good a job as they can, because people still fall through the cracks at every level, at every sport.
Yeah.
Even multiple time medalists at the Olympics get banned, come back, and still get a medal. And it's just like, okay, well, I feel like it's unfair, but that's just that's what the guidelines are, and that's what the rule book says. So you just got to play by it.
Do you think a 4-year ban is enough?
I believe in second chances.
Yep.
But I think if you burn your bridge with the sport that you're in at that time, you shouldn't be allowed to do that sport again.
So,
no.
So you think 4 years? You should think it should be a lifetime ban from the start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If that's the way that the sport wants to go, and they're saying it's a drug-free sport, it should be a lifetime ban.
So harsher consequences.
Yeah. So if you played rugby professionally and you got caught, you could go play another sport if they would let you into it, but your time with rugby is done. And same with CrossFit, same with weightlifting, same with anything. Yeah. That's how I see it.
Okay. So I think going into this year, and I think you said this on a podcast, is you were questioning whether this would be your last year or not.
Yeah.
I think you were thinking about, and you said this on Morning Chalk Up as well, you were thinking about potentially making this your final year, and obviously the elbow happened, and I think that left a bit of a bitter taste in your mouth because you didn't really leave on your own terms. But another part of you was thinking about maybe this is a time for me to explore team. And I know that one of the things that was weighing into that decision was, number one, that you felt like it was getting harder to be competitive in the individual division, and obviously when I say harder, not only I'm talking about competition day, but also like the sacrifices and the commitment you have to make to obtain that level of competition. But now knowing that 3 of the best guys in the sport, because these guys have been kind of there or thereabouts over the last few years, and now out, does that change your mind on what you want to do next year?
Yeah, fuck it. I'll go back in next year.
Yeah. Nice. On that note, thank you for joining out. Thank you for sharing all that.
Thanks.